One of the things that's important about TALIS, as we've said it many times today, is that it represents the voice of teachers and school leaders. Our next panel is going to help you all to hear that voice in person and get that on-the-ground perspective of what the implications of this data really mean. And so I want to introduce our panel moderator. This panel will be moderated by Anthony Rebora, and we are so excited that he agreed to help us with this today. Anthony is the managing editor of Education Week Teacher. I'm sure that many of you are actually familiar with his work through his writing. I'd like to invite our panelists forward and let you know that Anthony is going to introduce all of them for us. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had an in-depth review of the data in the survey and some insight into what it can tell us. So the goal for this segment is to get some perspectives from the field on the practical realities of teaching and teaching policy in the U.S. in light of some of the survey data. So I'm going to quickly introduce the panel. There's more information about each of the panelists in the program. I'm just going to go through in interest of time. At the end, we have Donna Chiera, who's the chair of AFT Teacher Policy Council and president of AFT New Jersey State Federation. Then Deborah S. Delisle, assistant secretary for elementary and secondary education with the U.S. Department of Education. Segun Eubanks, director of teacher quality for the National Education Association. Christine Hanby-Collins, who is a principal at Gaithersburg High School right here in Maryland, and the 2006 Principal of the Year. Stephanie Hirsh is the executive director of Learning Forward, professional development organization. And Sunila Varghese, National Board Certified Science teacher and interdisciplinary team leader at Robert Frost Middle School, which is in Rockville, Maryland, right here in Montgomery County. So I wanted to mention that I didn't organize the panel, but I wanted to thank Nick Taff for including some practicing educators on the panels. I know so often we go to these panels in DC on teacher policy, and there's no teacher in the room, so thank you for that. We have that. I also wanted to mention another housekeeping note. I forgot my watch, so if you see me checking my phone, it's not to check my email or watch the watch the World Cup. I'll just be monitoring the time. So let's get right into it. I wanted to start with something Professor Darling Hammond actually mentioned. We hear a great deal these days about low teacher morale and the extraordinary demands on teaching. Even we've seen a couple times this spring where there were these popular YouTube videos of teachers saying we just can't take it anymore, and those went around quite a bit. But this report finds that I think it was 89% of U.S. teachers surveyed in grades 7 to 9 said they were satisfied with their job, which was just shy of the international average of 91%. I wanted to ask the panelists whether this surprises you, and Sunila, I'm going to put you on the spot and start with you since you're the teacher voice. Okay. Does that finding surprise you as a teacher?
No, it doesn't surprise me. First of all, I have to say that I absolutely love what I do. I've been teaching 26 years. I've been 21 years at the same school, so I actually love where I work as well. I'm very passionate about what I do. I think most of that really comes from some professional development that I actually participated in a few years ago. In 2011, I became a nationally board certified teacher. And there was a lot of job-embedded professional development during that time. And I found that really focused on my growth professionally. I found that it really helped student achievement. So definitely professional development was a huge part of that, as well as just having a supportive administration. I work in a school where my administrator allows me to, I'm part of the leadership team, and values my voice and my opinion. So that really, I think, contributes to my satisfaction. And I think the other piece of it is I've had a chance in my school, especially this year, to really work on staff development and really looking at 21st century skills and what it means to be a 21st century teacher. And we've actually started kind of a grassroots movement where it started with just a couple teachers and it just kind of grew. Other people wanted to be a part of it. So that professional learning community within my school was a huge part of it. And I found all of those pieces really have contributed to my satisfaction at my job.
So that's Donna, yeah.
That doesn't surprise me because I spend a lot of time talking to teachers. Teachers love to teach. Teachers love to go in that classroom, and that moment when they connect with their students really is magic. But when you start talking to teachers, I think teachers have learned to separate teaching and working with kids from compliant issues. And I think, I'm curious because Linda talked about comparison from years ago. I wonder if 10 years ago, if that number would have even been higher, and if we continue on the course we're going now, where testing is overcoming teaching, and teaching has become, teachers have had their target on their back. They're the reason why the country isn't doing well. I mean, everything seems to be blamed on them. If 10 years from now, if we continue like that, I'm concerned of what that number is. But I think generally when you say, do you love your jobs? When you talk to teachers, they say the best part of their day is when they're in the classroom connecting with kids.
Yeah, and in fact, at NEA, of course, we spend a lot of time talking to our teachers and surveying them, and this issue of satisfaction remains relatively consistent, but what we've seen is a lot more evidence when we ask our teachers, are you considering leaving? Those numbers are rapidly increasing. So it's this complex situation of folks saying, yes, I'm satisfied and I love my job, and yes, I'm thinking about leaving. So how you balance kind of that contradictory message that you're beginning to get because of the complexity of the experiences that our teachers are getting with what they feel and see in their classrooms every day, and with some of the other pressures of the profession that I think are so well laid out in the data that are before us today.
Okay. This is a related question. So according to the survey, U.S. teachers work more hours per week than their international counterparts. It's quite a bit more. It's 45 hours a week versus 38 hours a week. And they're at the very top of the scale internationally. And they also spend more time on strictly classroom teaching. It was 27 hours a week versus 19% international average. What factors are behind these work hour norms in the U.S. schools, and how do they affect teachers and ultimately schools? Deb.
Yeah, I'll start with that. I think one of the critical issues here is that there is so little time provided in schools to collaborate, to share, to practice, to observe one another in classrooms, to talk about student work, et cetera. The schedules are so crowded in classrooms and within the schools. And we seem to place a larger value in the United States on the numbers of kids that teachers are actually teaching, as opposed to what it is that they're doing in the full encompassing of their professional life. And that's a really big issue. I think this didn't come as a surprise to me. I think if you read the newspaper or you watch the news on television, teachers are under attack in a way that I've never seen before. I've been in the business for 39 years, and it's really discouraging to see so many individuals attack teachers who have never actually walked in their shoes. And that's really concerning. The other part is, and I've been a principal and a superintendent as well, it's really hard when you're in a system, especially at your school building level, where the principal really wants to support teachers, but the system isn't in place, i.e. from I'll hug you while I'm saying this because he's a school board member. President of the school board, i.e. the school board, is worried about the budget, et cetera. And the more teachers you have, obviously the cost goes up higher. But unless we design schools to be a system of success, we're never going to get to the point where teachers are balancing out the actual interaction time with students as well as developing their own selves and developing the system as a whole.
So how could, Stephanie, sorry, did you have something to follow up?
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so what I thought was really interesting was the exact number of hours between the average in the US was 8 hours. And we have actually advocated for, I don't know how many years, that teachers should be able to spend 25% of their work day in powerful, collaborative, professional learning. And if we could get that number right, we could actually find the time in the school day for teachers to have what they need in order to really have the time for learning during the workday. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is we talk about, yes, it's in control at the school level, but we also have policies that promote this beyond the school day, collect your professional development hours. And so there's this mindset of compliance orientation toward teachers may get more professional development, but they're not getting the professional development that's really helping them in the moment that they need to address the challenges that are in front of them every day. So our policies are promoting different types of actions on the part of teachers, and that may be part of why they claim they get more professional development than others.
Christine, can we get your perspective? So how could school leaders get help in bringing that classroom hours down, where they would have more time for collaborative work and professional development? Teachers would.
Well, when we talk about professional development, one of the things that we have done, we really have a big push right now in our school system for professional learning community. So PLCs are beginning to be a big push across the country. But certainly you have to make time for that, and it is important, as my colleague here stated, that it is important that we embed it during the workday for our staff. And we found this year by having teachers to work together, I mean, initially teachers, because they have been accustomed to working alone and planning alone, are a little, kind of like, I don't know about this. But once teachers actually start talking about student data and start talking about best practices and share planning, and they are finding that this really works. And they are enjoying the collaboration and finding that they do not have to work alone, and that we share a lot of great ideas, and that they can share their challenges and problem solve together. But we're asking teachers now to do exactly what we want students to do in the classroom. We want students to collaborate, we want them to think critically, we want them to problem solve, and we want our teachers and our professional staff to be able to do the same thing. And so it is important that as we're moving in that direction, that we begin to provide the resources and the time that's going to be necessary. So our school district gave us professional development hours for substitutes so that we could give teachers time out of the classroom in order to collaborate and work in PLCs and have some common professional development.
Can I add one piece to this? One of the things that I find when I travel across school districts across the country is that when there has been far more distributed leadership within a school, and the school board and superintendent push down, if you will, the ownership of that school to the people in the school. So they take control of their spending and hiring practices, et cetera. We're seeing far more transformation of school schedules, for example, so that I've been in schools that there are very few people at the central office level, and the superintendent has pushed those financial resources to individual schools so the teachers and principal together can make decisions about, do they want a literacy coach? Do they want a smaller class size in order to have some other time? Do they want to hire additional teachers? And that's where we're finding a lot of growth within schools, is when they're able to better manage the resources available that's provided from the system at the school building level. And it's a collaborative venture.
I see. Well, so it sounds like Christine's school and Sunila's school are doing a great job with this, but across the board it doesn't look so good. I mean, the collaboration levels were much lower in the U.S. than in other parts of the world, and they weren't that great across the international average either. Why is that shift so hard? We've been hearing this for years. So why is that shift so difficult to make for schools when everybody kind of acknowledges that it's a problem? Donna?
And everyone keeps talking about the PLCs, the professional learning communities. And I think part of the problem, they're great ideas when they work, but the United States tends to, I'm going to call it, go with the flow with buzzwords, and now it's PLCs. But in 2 years, someone will come up with a new idea and we go to the next trend instead of really developing it. We also don't train teachers how to do this. We say, okay, we're going to put you in a group and you're going to have a PLC. And I found even during the day when they were in the school, even the built-in time for collaboration in school, teachers spent more time talking about the mechanics of the school, who's going to run the bake sale, what are we going to do for the assembly, and those type of management discussions rather than focusing on teaching and learning. And so as we create these PLCs and as we shift some of the power to the staff, we can't lose sight that PLCs and collaborative time truly should be used for teaching and learning discussions. And once you develop that, I believe that's when you'll see the shift. But right now, I don't believe that's what they're being developed for. It's more compliance. We need to do that.
Christine, and then
I would
Stephanie.
certainly like to add that it is important, as Donna has mentioned, in that you have to have professional development. In order to run or even facilitate an effective PLC, we have to provide the professional development on what is the expectations for a PLC, and how do you effectively facilitate? What does the agenda look like in a PLC? It is different than a department meeting. It's not a department meeting.
Stephanie?
Well, the most important part of all of this is that the leadership of the school has to have a vision for collaborative learning and collective and shared ownership for student success. And the PLC is a strategy to get there. And a couple of other problems not cited by my colleagues, but I'll reinforce everything you all said, is that in too many places, PLCs are not about learning. I mean, that's the L in PLC. We call them learning light. In too many places, actually teachers, it's another survey that's about to come out, teachers are ranking PLCs as their least favorite form of professional learning. So we need to be aware of that, because in too many places, PLCs have been co-opted by administrators to do administrative tasks in groups. And so maybe we don't call it PLCs, and maybe that's why teachers are reporting they have so much collaborative time, but they're not saying they have collaborative time for learning. And if we are to get better in schools, everybody's job has got to be about learning.
Those are great points. I want to hit on a couple other things. I do think we really need to acknowledge that we've done a very effective job in creating an isolated culture in our schools, that we still have a long ways to go. The close your door, do your own thing with your kids in your room is a strong culture that is really beginning to see change in our schools. But we have a long way to go in terms of really changing that culture. When our teacher leaders talk about it, they talk about blowing the doors open in ways that are really need to be revolutionary. I mean, the other piece to that, though, is we have to really think about changing the structures. What are we doing to reward collaboration? When you look at the development of the new generation of teacher evaluation systems, few of them reward collaboration. Most of them expect, we're going to look at you and what you do in your classroom with your kids alone. And there's very little of it that really values that and provides the structure for making collaboration something that we expect from our teachers and that we reward, and that becomes part of the everyday practice.
Okay, interesting. So I thought one of the most striking findings in the survey, and Professor Darling-Hammond touched on this too, was on student demographics. So it says 64% of U.S. teachers work in schools where more than 30% of the students come from disadvantaged homes. That's compared to only 20% internationally who have that same experience. And 63% work in schools where more than 10% of students have special learning needs, compared to 26% of teachers internationally. So I wanted to stop and dwell on that for a minute. Maybe, Deborah, you could talk about the policy implications of that.
Sure. I think this is a little surprising to me. It's one of the couple of things that I was very surprised at in the thing, because the big question mark for me, and I didn't have time to dig into this, was trying to understand the metric itself. So, is the term disadvantage measured the same way across the countries? Right. Are you saying yes? Oh, it's not. Okay, so we're done. No, thank you, Andreas. I appreciate it. Yeah. I leaned over to Linda when it came up, and I said, it's sad that sometimes the United States comes up on top in the wrong categories, right. And this would be one of them, because I just can't believe that the U.S. is tops in the world in the numbers of disadvantaged students. So that's a metric that I really would like to explore. But it's not to say that it is not an issue in our schools. The numbers of students living in poverty has increased significantly in the United States, and it's really alarming to me because I don't know that we've equipped all of our teachers and our principals with the tools necessary to deal with a very complex issue. But what we do know is that having a highly effective teacher in every classroom really can overcome those non-school factors, such as what poverty brings into the classroom. So we're working really strongly. Linda mentioned one issue on early learning of trying to get an initiative passed where all 4-year-olds, up to 200% of the free and reduced lunch category, would have access to high-quality preschool programs. We're one of the lowest in the world, actually, offering preschool for all 4-year-olds and the numbers of dollars that are also presented for preschool programs. So trying to get those kids to a big start. I think policy-wise, it also speaks to another issue Linda brought up, and also Andreas, and that is the amount of money that are associated with the challenges of working with students who are in poverty and also students who are disadvantaged or disabled. So those are really big issues that we have to address as a country, but still questioning the statistic itself, but not to belittle that it's an important piece.
Donna, you had a follow-up?
I agree, poverty is growing, and I agree you need to equip teachers and principals with how to deal with those students. But this just can't be done with principals and students and in schools. We need to address poverty as a whole. We need to look at wraparound services for our kids. Teachers can't do that alone. And unfortunately, as the recession hit and budget cuts, the first thing that we eliminated are the programs for kids who need the extra help. We eliminated guidance counselors. We eliminated school nurses. We eliminated social workers. We eliminated programs like art and music and phys ed and some of those programs that children in poverty don't get anywhere else. So while we are equipping schools to deal with poverty, if you're just dumping it on the schools, we're not going to get anywhere unless you start developing community schools where the community as a whole builds together a school and provides those services to support the learning. We're going nowhere.
I
Yeah.
totally agree with you on that. In fact, we've done a lot of work at the department on many of our programs of looking at culture, not just within the school, but also the essential component of parent and family engagement, and also community resources, wraparound services in particular. But the one thing I don't want to leave us with is the feeling that there are communities who absolutely have no hope when they're working with kids in poverty in particular. There are examples across this country where despite poverty, kids are achieving at really high levels. They're going on to colleges and post-secondary training. So we have to do a better job of learning from those communities. I've spent a lot of time in Ohio. Since I'm going to give great applause to Cincinnati, who has a Strive network occurring. That's a full community-based support structure that doesn't just look at the schools, but views the schools as an essential component of the community, and the community wraps itself around those kids and supports teachers and parents and community members in resolving this all around. I mean, they truly believe a community is known by the schools that it keeps. So I just want to say that we can also learn from places and extend that out to other communities.
There was a related finding that I thought was really striking, too, that it found that only 8% of U.S. teachers say they need additional professional development in working with students with high needs. And the report kind of speculates this may mean that U.S. teachers are receiving adequate preparation in this area. Do you agree with that, Stephanie, since you're in that area?
Well, it really contradicted the MetLife information that came out just over a year ago, where teachers ranked help with special needs populations at a 72% level, so that one really surprised me. The only interpretation I could potentially make from it is that everybody's attention has shifted so much to trying to implement new state standards and get ready for new assessments and new teacher evaluation systems that they just couldn't imagine putting one more thing on the list. And then I just want to remind us that the teachers who actually work with our special needs and gifted children are the ones who need to be key members of all professional learning communities, because they have this incredible perspective and expertise, and then other teachers can get their help and their insights right there on the job. So that's really important as well. But I'm curious how others saw it.
I was going to say, this was another one of my surprises.
Yeah.
First, because I connected it back to the MetLife survey. And I'm not a person to focus solely on achievement of students, but if we use that as one factor, our students with disabilities are not achieving at levels that would seem to be appropriate in the United States. And so I have great concerns over the why behind that. You know, what leads people to believe they have the skills or the resources or whatever it is where they don't want the extra. And I saw that disconnect with the MetLife.
You know,
Second.
what the data showed is that U.S. teachers said that they needed less professional development in a whole lot of other
Yeah,
areas.
yeah,
But
it's
it
true.
was there was also that other connection for the fact that our teachers also think that the professional development they get is less useful. And so I would question the extent to which this answer has as much to do with teachers' confidence in the professional development that they would get rather than the need for somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if those issues, I know from talking to teachers, they're intertwined. Again, if their perception of the professional development they're going to get is, Linda, what do you call it? Stay and spray and pray. If that's the impression, then they'll say, yeah, I don't need that. I'm better off going somewhere else.
They could pray in private.
Exactly.
So that's a good segue, because it did find that teachers were actually getting a lot of professional development, but not finding that it had a really strong effect on their teaching. I wanted to talk about that, and we've talked about it a little bit already, but what are workshops and those kind of single hit things continuing to grow? I thought we were hearing that things were getting better in that area. Donna?
I believe we're at this point in time, talking to teachers and visiting schools, we're still into the one-stop shopping. Professional development is an event versus a process. We hire consultants, they come in, they talk and tell you what you're supposed to do. We bring in book publishers who will tell you how this series is different from the next series. And we call that professional development. And you go to the event, you go to your classroom, you close your door. Professional development also because this year we may be doing a new math program, and you know that don't worry about it, don't invest in it, because 3 years from now when the curriculum changes, we're going to be doing another new math period. We do one stop, and we never really invest in the professional learning that we implement. We never really trust the teacher to say, here is a variety of methods and tools you can use. Look at the students in front of you and decide which works best. It's, we bought this math series, we shall all do this. So I think with professional development, we get a lot, we spend a lot on it, but it really isn't job embedded, it's not sustained, or it's not supported in our classroom, and it ends at the end of the school year.
Yeah, Stephanie, I know you do a lot of work in this.
Well, I just want to paint a different picture. So, I mean, that describes a lot of teachers' experiences, and in some cases, going to a workshop can be helpful, but it's a supplement, it's not the main course. And what I'm really curious about from the data and from the way professional learning is described to us as it occurs in other countries is, I think what we're advocating for is what would fall under informal learning. But it's still in what we advocate for in the US is every teacher a member of at least one learning team at a grade level or cross subject matter. Every teacher has that regular scheduled time to examine with other teachers the data on their student performance, to identify where they have their learning needs, to spend time researching what they need to know and how they will learn it. They have time during the school day to support each other in learning and gaining new knowledge and skills. They get the opportunity to go in the classroom and practice those skills and get feedback from colleagues and peers. They assess the impact of that learning on their practice, on their students, and then they determine to what degree did they accomplish what they need to accomplish, and they move forward. And it's that cycle of continuous improvement that we hear is what is defined by collaborative learning in other countries And even though our teachers rank that they have a lot of time for collaborative learning in this country, I doubt what I just described is what teachers experience when they check off, oh yes, we have time for collaboration. And that's the disconnect that we've got to figure out in this country, because we won't address all the needs of all the children and just all the different challenges that teachers have unless they have this true, authentic opportunity to learn over time together and support each other towards success.
Yeah.
Because I was able to calm myself down. This is an area that just gets me so emotional. I just get so upset about this topic because it's one that actually can be solvable. We continue to talk about it. I feel like every year it's deja vu all over again, whoever said that. And it's just, honestly, we can fix it. We can fix it by having individuals who are engaged in the work actually personalize their own learning and set up goals. And somehow, broad brushstroke across the United States, we have somebody in a hierarchical role who believes that I know what's best for my teachers. I'm going to offer them PD, and this is what it's going to be. It's going to be this, spray and pray, sit and get kind of thing. We are advocating for personalized learning for our students, and yet we are not modeling it for the adults in the system. It just drives me absolutely crazy because we continue to talk about it, and we have great people. I mean, there are some of them on this very stage who understand what it is that they need, who understand what their kids need, and how to respond to that. So we've got to get to a system where that's one of which that Stephanie described. And I'm hoping that in 2 and 3 years, we're not having the same conversation. Otherwise, I'm going to just scream.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, Groundhog Day all over again.
I guess what I just wanted to share is just my experience is a little bit different. I think it's a little more like what Stephanie was saying. I've been very fortunate because I have an administration and an outstanding staff development teacher who really, we do find opportunities within the school day to do some collaboration, to have a chance for teachers to learn with teachers. Our staff development teacher is not a drive-by kind of person. I mean, we really find meaning in what we're learning. We've had the opportunity, every single teacher in our building has had an opportunity to go and observe other teachers in the building and learn from each other and really look at critical thinking and problem solving. And again, we're doing that work as well as teachers. We're looking at how we can, in this process, how we can be critical thinkers and problem solving. So I just wanted to just say from my perspective, it is a little bit different.
Are you in Montgomery County?
I'm in Montgomery County,
Yeah,
yes.
and I mean, one of the largest school districts in the country, and we all know the story of Montgomery County and how it's closed the achievement gap. And we can point to other very large urban districts that are really committed like this, like Long Beach and Gwinnett, and we can point to smaller districts like Prince George's. Are you committed to this? We expect to see it in 3 years, right? We're going to come back in 3 years and you're going to tell us. I wanted to just say 2 sentences, okay? So we have this new vision of what we want to happen for students in classrooms. And the way to help teachers understand that vision is to engage them in professional learning where they have the opportunity to experience what we want them to be able to create for their students. And that's not happening enough. And I can also say it is really difficult to do. So everybody who is in here with some responsibility, authority over professional learning, designing transformed professional learning is one of the most challenging tasks we've ever had to face. And it really requires everybody in this room collectively for all of us to get smarter about it and support people who are trying to make it happen.
Okay. Great. So let's talk about teacher evaluations, which is a contentious and huge topic right now. So from the survey, it sounds like U.S. teachers actually get quite a bit of feedback on the work they're doing, but they don't feel like it matters much, either in terms of their practice or their career development or job position ramifications. What can we learn from these findings? What do they suggest about changes should be making in the way they observe and evaluate teachers? Segun, do you want to take that?
Sure, why not? And actually, I think it really connects to the professional development piece, because I think that what it begs is at least gives us an opportunity. Frankly, so much in what we see here is discouraging. I'll get to that later, but this is a place where there's a unique opportunity, particularly because we are now, at least in the broader policy community, right in the middle of this huge teacher evaluation reset button. And it started, I think, as a movement that was very much messaged around data around getting rid of bad teachers and finding more efficient ways of moving people out. And because of data like this and reasonably minded people like Linda Darling-Hammond and others who began to continue to push, it gives us an opportunity to say, how do we transform teacher assessment and evaluation systems into systems that are about improvement and growth and development? The fact is that most of them before the reset that we're in now, most of them didn't do a good job of that, frankly. And many of the ideas that have come out of the new teacher evaluation movement have failed in that regard as well. So if we can find a way to really look at how you provide the kind of feedback that will help folks grow, and then connect that to professional development in real and meaningful and ways, and make it teacher-led so that it is about teachers learning from teachers and not teachers learning from experts who've not been in the classroom for a really long time, then we can really, I think, begin to change that paradigm.
Sunila, what works for you in terms of getting feedback and being evaluated?
Definitely feedback from my principal and my administrative team has helped.
Based on observation?
Based on observations, yes. I would also say that this year I actually had other people come into my classroom and observe me and give me some feedback on just engagement, looking at student engagement. And just that kind of feedback I found just coaching, peer coaching was really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Are you concerned about being evaluated based on test scores?
No.
No? Oh, yeah, Donna.
This is the one area that I agree, because of the publicity, teacher evaluation has been linked. When you talk to teachers in the classroom, many teachers, especially in our large urban areas, small urban areas, cities believe that this is a conspiracy and this is to fire teachers. And as much as we continue to say, if we get this right, you will receive feedback, it will be professional growth, and growth should be an ongoing thing. I find myself, as I was going through what some of the topics we'd be talking about two things: one-stop shopping event and compliance. And for most teachers, that's what this is. For 45 minutes or an hour, a couple times a year, someone comes in your room, does a check, write some things, give it to you, and improve yourself, rather than having people sit and discuss this. AFT, and I know we are strong proponents of peer review and assistance. I think peers, working with peers, talking about how to improve are less threatening than someone coming in and saying, well, your test scores were bad. Right. Well, that's fine. How do I improve it? So we really need to look at this teacher evaluation. We seem to be on this train to get this done. Sometimes getting it done fast isn't getting it done right. Instead of introducing parts of this and seeing what works or what doesn't, it's like we got to have it in place. We're also not looking at multiple measures. Somewhere the discussion about multiple measures has been trumped by test scores. So, while it may be working in some places, most teachers see this as test-driven, not teacher-driven, and it's out to get me. And no one really cares about the professional growth. And in all honesty, that's what I'm hearing from teachers.
Christine, yeah.
Okay. I thought as a principal I needed to chime in on this one for sure. Well, first, when we talk about teacher evaluations, there's evaluations, there's observations, and there's feedback. And so all evaluations aren't necessarily the purpose of observations is to give teachers feedback. And when we think about feedback, we also have to think about it not just the principal given feedback. So feedback comes in varied forms, and we also, we have department chairs, and we have content specialists, and then we have teachers sharing amongst themselves as well for peer feedback. But one of the things from this, from the survey results, I thought that was good feedback for principals.
Right.
You know, and sharing this data with principals, understanding that teachers do not feel that they are getting the feedback that they need for professional growth. And so I thought, when I read this as a principal, I started reflecting about my own practices. So I thought that this was really good feedback that principals could use as we are preparing one for a new school year, and how we can do better with giving teachers effective feedback that they could then use in their practices, and how that looks. It's not all from a formal evaluation. Feedback comes in many different forms. I think we also, as school districts, need to think about how do you provide time for your principals and assistant principals, your school leaders, to be instructional leaders. And in order to be able to be effective instructional leaders, there are some other things that have to come off the administrators' plates. Because, you know, our plate is like spaghetti falling all off the sides. It's full, it's overflowing. And so we also have to think about, and school board members and superintendents, have to see what resources can we provide administrators so that they can have more time to be instructional leaders. For example, having business administrators that can handle some of the business aspects of school administration, so that that principal has more time for instructional leadership. So I think it really, we have to look at it in different ways. But I thought this was really good feedback for principals, and I certainly want to share this data with principals across the nation, because I thought that was very important.
Yeah, Deb.
Could I just add one thing? I was really so excited to hear you talk about people coming in your classroom to help you think about student engagement. I'd like us to push a little in our thinking about teacher evaluation. I'm going to say this rather flippantly, but you know, we focus so much on what the teacher's doing during observations and evaluations, and you know, here's my flippant, I don't really care. I do care, but I really care about what students are doing in response to what the teacher's doing. And we do so little of that, of thinking about, you know, what's the level of discourse among students? Is it really good, high level? Are we engaging students in a really robust way? Is every student engaged in becoming passionate about an area of interest to them? So I really want us to think a little bit more strategically about not just all of our focus on that teacher, but on what students are doing in response to that teacher. So I really applaud your work in that area on student engagement, because I think when we're engaging now with more rigorous standards, our kids are not going to get there unless we really figure out a way to engage them much more robustly in their learning at hand.
Sure, let's.
Well, just two more thoughts on that. One is, one of the statistics says that our teachers have the fewest opportunities to actually be in other classrooms to see other teachers, and we saw that before with the MetLife survey. And if really some of the most valuable feedback and learning opportunities is for when teachers are in each other's classrooms. And so we really need to think about how we can address that. The other thing that I just want us to be cautious of, because we're trying to implement 2 and 3 major initiatives, you know, simultaneously in many schools, sometimes teachers are getting feedback on a new teacher evaluation system, but they're actually trying to implement new standards, and they really want feedback on how well the implementation of the standards and the curriculum is going. And so systems have a responsibility to tie those initiatives together so that teachers don't have to figure out, what am I going to be evaluated against today? And I know some states are really getting smarter about saying we're going to narrow the feedback that we're giving teachers around 2 or 3 things that we've identified as priorities, and I think more districts and states could probably learn from that.
So speaking of more rigorous standards, the teachers surveyed gave themselves U.S. teachers gave themselves very high marks in self-efficacy, including in the tricky areas of crafting good questions for students, helping students think critically, and implementing alternative instructional strategies. I wanted to get your sense, you know, looking at all the schools you've been in, whether you agree with those assessments, and where you think teachers need to improve, particularly in light of the implementation of the new standards. Christine, can I get your thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, we have a shift in how we are testing students. when you're looking at the Common Core standards and the PARC assessments and how we are testing students is different. It's no longer good enough to just be able to recall information. It's how do you apply that knowledge. And so it's a shift in what we're expecting students to be able to do. So therefore, there has to be a shift in what we are expecting teachers and how they teach. And they are, we are expecting teachers now to have students to collaborate, problem solve, critically think, and to prepare them for the assessments that are here today and for the Common Core standards. And so when we're looking at what we are expecting teachers to do, I think teachers are starting to they know that the professional development is important because they're expected to do something new and different, and they want to know how to do it. I think we're also going to have to get our university preparation programs on board because we have new graduates who are coming out of school, and they should be getting this professional development in their university preparation program. So it's going to be really important that we not just have a K through 12 system, but that we're extending all of this preparation to our universities as well, as we are preparing teachers to do something different. It's a shift that aligns from what we're expecting the students to do to what we're expecting the teachers to do and how we are assessing our students. So it's going to be really important that all of these things are aligned with the professional development, what we're looking for in observations. I mean, all of these things have to come together and align if we are going to move our students and prepare them for 21st century.
Segun?
Yeah, I want to jump on that because I like your question, because my first answer is generally I do agree with those assessments in that, on average, most of our teachers do a lot of that work very well. When you really start to peel that onion, you begin to look at what we're challenged with is that those, number one, those teachers who are most likely to do these things well are most likely to be in high-performing schools with high-performing students, and those teachers who need more help or more experience in doing these things well are more likely to be in schools with the highest need. So when you begin to look at that distribution is where you begin to see, you begin to kind of peel back and say that for the most part, you see teachers who are working hard, who are getting good professional practice, who are working on helping students think critically, but where our teachers tend to need more help is in those, we're a very diverse country, as you know, and in how you're going to begin to differentiate that, how you deal with doing those same things with students who have significantly higher needs, who are coming in with significantly more academic challenges, is where I think our teachers need more help and more support.
So that gets back to some of the professional development issues we were talking about earlier. It's the one area where teachers reported a lower sense of efficacy was in motivating students who show low interest in school. That was the one area that they were far beneath the other categories. Sunila, why is that such a difficult area for teachers?
I think so much of it has been focused on, getting the content across. One of the things I found this particular year we did that was very different is we really looked at a focus group of students that were incoming into the middle school. So we looked at incoming sixth graders. We really looked at things like their attendance rate, their grades, and we really wanted to find a way to connect with those students. So we brought some of those kids in during the summertime and tried to make some connections with them. I think really looking at those social emotional needs are very, very important, and that takes time. Mm-hmm. And so much of what we do in the classroom is getting that content across, but there's another huge piece, and that is that social emotional piece in connecting with kids. So we really made it a priority before school even started to get to know some of these high-flying students, and then throughout the year just kept in contact with them and kept connections with them just to make them know how much we cared about them. And even just that, one teacher reaching out or saying hello to a student on a daily basis, we found significant growth in just our sixth grade class. It was really astonishing just looking at attendance rate for some of our students. We found that actually kids who were not coming to school so much in fifth grade were now attending because we really think the difference was just that connection with the teacher and that student showing that we cared.
Stephanie?
Well,
Yeah.
I kind of want to challenge that, not your answer. I think your answer is great. I want to challenge the view that this is something new or different because I've been in the field for more than 3 decades. And even when I was a director of professional development and we did a survey of teachers, what are your top 3 needs in professional development? The first thing was always student motivation. And I don't think teachers want more professional development on student motivation. I think what this speaks to is the issue of how do we design incredibly, like you said, engaging learning opportunities and learning settings. And you can't get that through a one-shot workshop. And so it all goes back to create the learning opportunities for educators that replicate what they need to create for their students.
Donna.
And this also goes back to equity and supports, because I want to go and teach in the school that you go to, because so many of our urban centers and larger school districts, this is not happening because, again, the equity is not there. Our students have all of these needs, and the first group we cut when there are budget cuts are those people who support the education of students, and it falls back on the teachers, which then go to the community schools. So as much as we tend to look at all of these issues in isolation, I think we can't forget that we're talking about school systems, and school systems are circular like a wheel, and if one part's not there, we can't address motivation of students unless we talk about equity of services to support students and staff, which we don't talk about professional development. So it's all related.
Yeah, one of the things I'd add with this is not to absolve the IHEs, Institutions of Higher Education. I can't remember you had mentioned it earlier, because I don't know that they're particularly strong, broad brushstroke here, particularly strong in helping within teacher training programs and leadership licensure programs of really focusing on the student engagement piece and creating these systems. One of the things we're finding in the most rapidly improving schools in the nation is that within these schools, they do everything they can to ensure that all kids are engaged. And a lot of staffs are now looking at leading indicators, trying to predict which kids are off track to be college and career ready. And so often our system has been set up as a whole to respond and be reactive to kids not graduating on time, and all of a sudden there's a problem, and we don't start to think about it from preschool on up. We start to think, what are we gonna do in 8th grade or 9th grade for these kids, as opposed to thinking very early on. So I think it has to be system-wide that you mentioned. And we do find that there are folks who just really are doing great things in this area, so we've got to lift them up even more and celebrate those. And also, I think IHEs have to step up to the plate here in probably everything we've talked about today.
You mentioned absenteeism among students. This was kind of a hidden finding, I think, in the report, but based on principal surveys in the U.S., both teacher tardiness, student and teacher tardiness and absenteeism were much more common in the U.S. schools than the international average. It was something like 1% of U.S. principals said that teachers arrive late at least weekly, compared to just 10% internationally. What do you attribute that problem to? Does anyone have any thoughts on that one? Why we have higher rates of absenteeism?
For teachers.
Mainly teachers. I think
well,
teachers, since we're talking about teachers.
I mean, it's an interesting topic. It's my turn to be a little flip too, because when my first look at it was, well, we work 7 hours more per week than everyone else around the world, and so if we're a little late on the front end, we more than make up for it on the back end. So
That's a better flip than mine. That was great.
that's my answer. I'm sticking with it.
And one of the things, as a local president of my union, this is something we have discussed internally, district-wide for years. In a way, I was, no offense, glad to see that this is a national issue, and I'm sitting in a room with a lot of policy people. And I really think this is something that someone really needs to dig deeper into and to see why this is, because while the statistics are there and we know it, the question is why, and if it's there, why aren't we trying to figure out what causes it, and are there ways we can improve it? And so I challenge the policy people in the room to do so.
Did you have a comment?
Do you want to?
I hate to jump up, but I'm thinking.
Less flippant than me, Lynn?
I'm thinking of back to my own teaching experience as a high school English teacher, and I have 2 daughters who are teachers now. And, you know, when I was teaching 180 kids a day and assigning an essay every week and working all the hours that we saw here, the only way you could get your grading done was to take a mental health day, you know, and most of the people I knew who taught English at least, had to do that just to keep up with the workload. And I would say that I see that with my daughters now and their friends and colleagues. You can't sustain that workload and do all the grading and everything else without figuring out a way to buy some time.
Just one other, the other good piece of data that in another recent study that came out, it still said, even though this report talked about a problem with teacher absenteeism, is that teachers are absent significantly less than the number of days that they're given to be off. And so people are saying teachers are absent too much, but less than what they get in their contract. We don't use all of our time that is in the contract. So
there's a little bit of double
a little
standard
bit,
there.
exactly.
I was actually glad, Linda, you brought up the English example, because when I was talking about the leading indicators before, these schools are also using leading indicators such as adult absences in schools, because they're trying to make this correlation. You know, if kids don't show up and teachers don't show up, then we have a system that's obviously broken or needs repair in some fashion. What's it about? But several high schools I've been into recently, and it's causing a little stir among teachers, but have taken the notion that if you are an English teacher, you actually teach fewer classes, because there's a recognition that if we really want to give out appropriate commentaries back on English papers, for example, and readings with kids, then they need that time. So they actually have it. It's causing a stir among folks. And I'm hoping it continues to cause a stir, because if we want writing, for example, embedded in social science classes and even in mathematics, then we've got to give credence to the kind of feedback we want to give kids. But I know when I have visited other countries, teachers are there, and they always have those old blue books we had, and they're always writing back to kids. And kids will tell you that that feedback is essential, especially for really bright kids. A lot of times really bright kids will get a great job on the top, but they're looking like, well, what did you like? Is it my vocabulary? Is it my use of complex structure? What do you like about it? So it's just a really big issue on the scheduling piece.
Okay. Let me just ask one more quick question before we go to Q&A. The teacher's guide portion of the report emphasizes that other factors associated with teachers' sense of self-efficacy include good interpersonal relationships within a school, both among teachers and the students, and teachers having a say in school decision-making. Christine, what can school leaders do to create that kind of environment? Or are there broader policy issues?
Well, certainly, I think that we're seeing the implementation of instructional school leadership teams across the nation, and people are finding, schools are finding that that is effective. And so within the makeup of an instructional leadership team, for my school, my instructional leadership team consists of not just administrators, but all of my department chairs. We have 3 elected faculty reps who are elected by the faculty to represent them on the leadership team. We have students and parents. And so, and our meetings are open to anyone who would like to come and offer input. And that leadership team makes the decisions for the school. And so I think by being more inclusive, I think we're seeing a big move for more of that across the nation, because just as we are expecting teachers to collaborate, we're expecting the students to collaborate, the expectation is that administrators also are collaborative, that this is not something that we just make decisions from the top without input from others. And so we're all in this together, and if we believe that, then we must include everyone in the decision-making process. But certainly you can't have 170, 250 people, 150 people at a meeting making a decision necessarily, but certainly having representatives from all stakeholders on a leadership team helps to support that.
Stephanie?
Well, and systems really have a responsibility to create this new vision for what it really means to be a teacher. I mean, what you're doing at your school needs to happen in every school within a school district. And that means that, and for teachers need to know that they're joining a profession that offers them a career path, that doesn't say you will continue to do the same thing in the same classroom for the next 30 years, or you have to go look for something else. Teachers need to know that their voice will be heard, that they have opportunities for expressing and engaging in leadership, either formal or informal. They know that they will be recognized for stepping up and speaking out, and that they'll work in a collaborative environment where they will engage with other teachers on a regular basis, and that they'll continue to grow and improve as a result of that.
Well, I believe that schools across the nation are incorporating a model. They may not call it the school leadership team, but I believe principals across the nation are incorporating a model. Very few principals are working on an island by themselves and making decisions. That's just not how we lead schools today. And so I know that the NASSP, the National Association for Secondary School Principals, when we're providing professional development and the information that we're sharing with principals across the nation, collaboration is a big piece. And so I am, currently reading applications for National Principal of the Year, and in each of these applications, I am reading about the collaborative nature, the things that they're inputting in their schools. I'm reading about their leadership teams and how they're doing this. So I know that this is not just something that's happening in Montgomery County, it's not just happening in Maryland, but it is happening across the nation with principals.
I'll just note quickly, great, this is something great principals have been doing for a long time as well, but systems need to be far more explicit and formalized about these career paths and creating these hybrid teacher-leader roles that are formalized, that become part of contracts for schools, that become part of career paths around mentor teaching and teacher leaders that really can help to bring that teacher voice in very explicit ways. So it's not just great principals doing it, which they do so well, but it's part of the system's expectation as well.
Real quickly, Donna?
Very quickly, and not only do we need to create them, but we need to consistently implement them. There needs to be trust. I can't pick and choose which issues I want people to weigh in on which issues I don't. And when it's consistently implemented, they work. But when you get into a situation where I'll let you weigh in on this, but not this, you didn't agree with me, I'm doing this, the trust breaks down, and then it doesn't work. So consistency in implementation and trust really needs to be there for that to work.
Okay, great.
I would just add, that's why we call them school improvement plans. It's not the principal improvement plan, it is the school's improvement plan. So we're doing school improvement planning across the nation, and that has to include a larger group. It's not the principal's improvement plan, it is the school's improvement plan.
So we have a little bit of time to open it up for questions, and we do have someone with a microphone. So please, if you have any questions for the panel, there's one over here or back there.
Thanks. Good afternoon. I'm Loretta Goodwin from the American Youth Policy Forum, and thank you for all the great information that was shared. I really liked what you were talking about in terms of wanting feedback from a variety of different sources. And I'm curious, we're doing work related to student feedback and surveys that are given to students. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how that's incorporated into improving teacher growth and development. Thank you.
I would just say, I'll specifically speak about my school, Gaithersburg High School. We encourage all of our teachers to give a student survey at the end of the courses so that they can get that feedback. That is not given to administrators. It is specifically for the teachers to get feedback from their students and to be reflective. We also have many of our teachers who are using technology today. I mean, there's so many options for using technology to have students to give you feedback, even on specific assignments, on specific lessons. And so we are finding that teachers are being reflective on that feedback that they're getting from their students.
One of the things I'd add to that is one of the things we're seeing in some of the more rapidly improving schools is where it's not left to chance. So we see schools in part of school improvement teams actually giving out student engagement surveys to every student and sitting down. And I've sat in on a couple of those, and I have to say people have to be very well prepared to get back what they get back. I remember just one example. I was sitting at a high school, and the teachers were, all the staff members actually were sitting around with the results of the student engagement survey, and most of for the first 45 minutes was like, that's not true, who said that, kind of thing. And after about 45 minutes, people sort of took a deep breath and said, oh, this is hard to take, but, you know, kids are not feeling as though we're very engaging. Kids don't feel like we care whether or not they're absent from school. So it was a great amount of strategy around what that school would do. I was just mesmerized 2 years later going to that school because it was at a high school. Every teacher, every day, either at the front end or the end of the day, were walking out with kids to say, thanks for coming today. Here's something for you to come back to tomorrow. Middle school teachers meeting kids at buses, because they were all focused on culture. And I would say not just student engagement surveys, but how comfortable do parents feel coming into the school is also really critical. I really believe we've not done enough in this country to put a great emphasis on the culture and climate of schools. And I'm a firm believer that culture eats strategy any day of the week. And so with that, you can't fix the culture or modify it or enhance it unless you know how every person in that structure is feeling. Teachers are feeling, kids are feeling, adults are feeling walking in that building. So I think we need to do more of it. But where we're finding great results is when it's much more, I want to say formalized with air quotes, in the sense of a whole school taking it on and not leaving it to chance.
Other questions?
Thank you. I wanted to comment on two things here. One is the equity question, the inequity question, the poverty question. I didn't find the data surprising or challenging. It seemed to parallel similar data that was in PISA, in the US report, and what we have to learn from PISA. In fact, it confirms what was in the department's Equity Commission, and the recommendations that were made by the Equity Commission on what needed to be done about inequity, which is the same thing that was made, recommendations that were made in the OECD recommendations about how to deal with inequity. So I appreciate it if Deborah would talk about what the status of implementing those recommendations are. The second thing I wanted to comment or have commented on is something we haven't raised, which is an issue that's very much in the public spotlight right now. This data says that 83% of the teachers have a permanent contract on an average, an international average of the countries participating, whereas only 67% of American teachers have a permanent contract, and we know that's under fire right now. So that's what I'm looking for a response from.
Okay. Deborah, you want to address the first part of that?
Sure. Yeah, so actually, there are several groups in the department who are working on that Equity Commission set of recommendations, and also we're engaging with civil rights groups on a lot of those recommendations. One of the key pieces of that is the teacher equity issue, and so we actually will be coming out with a 50-state teacher equity strategy within the next several months. It's being finalized. So it continues to be a work in progress, and we interact quite frequently with the civil rights organizations. Another component of that is we have a new Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, and so she has been really aggressive in terms of working with reported issues of inequity across the country in schools, and probably have opened up more cases just within the last year than perhaps the last 5 combined.
The second part of the question.
The contract.
Yeah, permanent contract.
It's very difficult to be a teacher and to not follow whatever you're told to do if you're not sure, if you don't have a contract. So if we're talking about you shall follow this curriculum and you shall do this and you shall do this and you shall do this, you're going by the letter of the law. A contract and job security allows me to sometimes take chances, to meet my students where they are, to take risks, to bring them where they are, to do that engagement, to truly become a professional without the fear. And I think not having a contract, the teachers I talk to, and when you say to them, why'd you do that? I was told to do that, and if I don't do that, I'm not getting a contract. So I think there's some freedom and some professional freedom that once you have that contract, that is, you're kind of, the chains are taken off and you can do what you need to know you have to do professionally. That's my perspective. My colleague from the EA.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, I would also just add that part of what so many folks, particularly when you're in the DC policy arena, don't realize is obviously across the country just how different the circumstances are for teachers around. People talk about teachers and they talk about unions and they think that that's just the way it is. And what they don't realize is that, 2/3 of our teachers don't even work under a contract with the union because of all of the various types of state laws and regulations that are happening. And I think some of my international colleagues may be more accurate about what's happening in those other countries, but in most of them, it's relatively consistent. The rules and regulations around teacher contracts are relatively more consistent. And so I think you're right when you look at what's going on with the attacks on teachers' unions and contracts in particular. If the trend continues now, that number might be even less 5 years from now. The problem is that there's I would be surprised if there was any relationship between having a contract and any of the other key indicators in the places that we're behind in with these other countries. Some people say, well, if we get rid of contracts, all these other indicators around teaching are going to improve, and to date, I don't think there's much evidence of that.
We have time for one more, you think? Yeah. Thank you.
I'm Rob Lippincott, working with Teach Now, which is trying to figure out how to use 21st century skills to certify teachers. And my question has to do with something that I don't think I found a lot of data in the study about, which is the certification process, the credentialing process. How do we teach teachers to be teachers, and then how do we keep them in the professionalism of the profession? Sunila is a board-certified teacher. That's not a requirement for teaching. It's a recognition of a level of excellence. Deb talked a little bit about institutes of higher education needing to step up, meaning needing to really become better ways of training teachers. Given we talk a lot about standards in all for students, Common Core and others, we have the UNTASC standards, which are, I think, almost a consensus pick, that's a great way to think about teaching. Is there anything in the study or anything in your practice that feels like we should change or improve the way certification works?
I'll talk about recertification. I think we should not recertify based on the number of hours somebody documents, and instead recertification should be like national board certification, should be a process where people get to reestablish that they are competent in the teaching standards that are to drive their practice, and that you can do that with your peers. I know that they're piloting that in school districts in New Hampshire right now, where teachers actually pull together a portfolio. They document how their practice aligns with their standards. They share it with other teachers, and the teachers make the recommendation actually to the principal about whether the teacher has earned enough credit through this process, not credit in terms of hours, to be recertified for additional years on their license. In this country, and I learned this from a New Jersey colleague years ago, we spend too much time worrying about counting what we're able to count rather than counting what matters. So we need to think of new ways of doing this.
On the certification question, the U.S. Teachers didn't differ much from their international colleagues on the percentage of them who said that they were licensed or prepared. But TALIS doesn't tell us much about the dramatic differences in the quality of preparation that may be occurring, and there's a lot of other data to show that. And so I do think there is a lot to be said.
It was like 95%
Right.
had said they were.
Right. And so there's a lot to be said about how we need to change that. There's a lot of movement underway, particularly around teacher performance assessments as part of licensure systems, teachers not only going through coursework and passing paper and pencil tests, but being able to demonstrate that they can teach to high standards in really meaningful ways. Programs like EdTPA and others that are now really beginning to take hold around the country to really make certification a more effective benchmark for readiness for the profession.
Just wanted to say, I can't really speak to certification per se, but I can tell you just as a teacher who did go through the national board process. What an amazing process it was, just reflecting back on my practice, being able to work with other teachers who are nationally board certified. It's something I know that other schools are doing. They have programs where definitely like the entire staff is actually working towards different parts of nationally board certification. So it is something that has been a huge impact in my own personal growth.
And very quickly, we need to figure out the college certification programs tend to work in isolation, and then they come into the public school system. We need to figure out, and the theory that you receive in college is important, applying it, we need to figure out how to marry the teacher prep programs with the institution that the teachers are going to in a more practical way, and not waiting till their junior and senior year for student teaching.
A quick follow-up comment here from, oh, sorry.
I just wanted to mention, we don't have very many questions about initial teacher preparation and the quality of the programs on the TALIS 2013 survey. It was very difficult to come up with questions that worked in all of the 34 countries that participated in TALIS because people's education systems are quite different. But we're actually launching a study in 2015 at the OECD that will be a comparative study of initial teacher preparation. It would be something that the US might be really interested to participate in. We're going to look at data at a system level and really try to make international comparisons to see what works.
Thank you so much. So, do we have time for one more, or one more quick question, really quick? You have to go. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Tony Garcia from the Mexican Teachers Union. We are here invited by our colleagues from the American Federation of Teachers. Thank you very much to have this opportunity. We presented yesterday the results of PISA in Mexico. And as many here said, there were many news, but the information is really very rich. I mean, after hearing all the questions and the interventions, I was thinking about the need maybe to stop a little bit, at least in some countries, this kind of fever of evaluation and support more teacher professional development. Because when money is, when we are short of money, which is most of the cases, frequently evaluation is not followed by what is supposed to be followed, teacher training. So know how many governments spend in evaluation and how many they spend in teachers' development should be a very interesting question for this kind of surveys. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take it under. All right, so I think that's all the time we have. And there's agreement about the professional development. So I want to thank the panel and.
So how great was that? I loved that discussion. I want to thank Anthony and all the panelists as well. Why did I love it? This is what professional development is really about. This was a group of smart people with different perspectives coming together and reflecting on some really powerful data. And the other reason I really loved it is that the impetus was not on, oh, the world is in crisis and there's nowhere we can go. But instead it was, how can we take this data and move forward and improve school teaching and learning for every student? So I want to thank you all for the tenor and the tone of the conversation, for the good ideas that came out. Christine, you may have said my favorite thing, which was that you cannot wait to take this data and use it as you go back to the beginning of the next school year, and to think about how you as a principal can use this data to do differently or better or even reinforce the things that you're already doing well. So thank you for that. It was really a terrific panel. The other big, huge key, how many times do you think we heard the word collaboration today? More than 10? More than 20? I want to, before I close today, I do need to thank some very important people. For Nick Taft, this has been a really great experience because it's been one that has been truly collaborative. And I want to thank two of my colleagues who I've worked really closely with. Andreas mentioned Kristen Weatherby. Kristen works at the OECD and manages the TALIS survey, and she has been an infinite fount of wisdom and patience and great ideas. And then I also want to recognize my colleague Elizabeth Foster. Wave, Elizabeth. Elizabeth is our Vice President for Strategic Initiatives at Nick Taft, and her expertise in all of these content areas and the research around them really helps to propel Nick Taft forward. The three of us have probably met at least once a week for the last several months, and it has been a huge professional development experience for me. So I really want to thank both of these really fabulous women. I also want to acknowledge Carrie Burke, who had the microphone, who really helped to put together the logistics for this meeting. It was terrific, and everything went great, so thank you. And Karen Cheeks, who has been helping with our communications. I don't see Karen right now. Oh, there she is in the back, who's done an amazing job. And we also had a great experience working with the OECD Communications Office, so I want to acknowledge all of your help and great ideas. Most of all, I really want to thank all of you who are here today. You know, people kind of rolled their eyes when we suggested that a Friday afternoon was going to be a great time for a big release. But you all came, and you came because this is important data, and this is important data because it can be used to change, and it can be used to make things better. And so what I'm going to say to you is that you're not off the hook yet. You made it on a Friday afternoon. You stayed till the end. But now we need your help. We need every teacher in this country to know about TALIS. We need every school principal in this country to know about TALIS. And we need to all think collectively about how we can take what we learned through TALIS, we can mesh it with other surveys that we all count on, and we can really make the kinds of changes that the panel, that Linda, that Andreas were pointing out that needed to be done today. And so I thank you all for coming. I thank you for sharing the information. We did videotape the day, and it will be available next week along with the slides. And so we look forward to your taking that link once it's available, which we'll get out to you through the registration desk list, and sharing it out further. TALIS helped to uncover teachers' voices, and now we need to make sure that those teachers' voices are heard loudly so that we can really transform teaching and learning. Thanks for being here today.